Hello and welcome to Bustle and Flow, a limited series we are trying out focusing on pop culture, highlighting Indigenous artists. CSUN's American Indian Studies program and American Indian Student Association recognizes and acknowledges the Sisevitam, the first people of this ancestral and unceded territory of Sisevenga that is now occupied by our institution. And it honors their elders, past and present, and the Sisevitam descendants who are citizens of the Fernandino Tataviam Band of Mission Indians. AIS recognizes that the Sisevitam are still here and recognize our neighbors, the Shumash and Tongva. I am your host, Roman Zaragoza. I am an alumnus of CSUN and proud member of CSUN's American Indian Student Association. And I'm currently in Montreal on unceded and ancestral lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka, the Mohawk. On today's episode of Bustle and Flow, we have the amazing Joey Montoya here with us today. How are you doing, Joey?
I'm good. It's been a good week, and I was just at a wedding last week, and it was just really beautiful to be with people and family and friends. So I'm excited and fired up and ready for the rest of the year.
Sounds great, man. Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much for talking with us today. And before we dive into too much, I would like to take this time to let you introduce yourself, however you'd like.
Yeah, my name is Joey Montoya. I'm Lipan Apache from the Lipan Apache Band of Texas, but I was born and raised in San Francisco, California. Currently live in Los Angeles right now, and I am the CEO and founder of Urban Native Era.
Woo woo. Oh man, dude, I've been such a big fan of yours for just so many years because Ray has talked about you so many, for so long, and I've really looked up to you and Urban Native Era, and I just bought another hat. Like I'm all in, and I'm so proud of y'all. And I kind of just want to dive right into just some questions and learn more about your journey with this. So. Yeah, can you speak a little bit more about your early engagement with the fashion industry? Like, who are your influences, your inspirations growing up, or getting you into the fashion industry?
There wasn't really like a direct line of like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is like fashion is my thing. It was really as an artist and creative, and I grew up in San Francisco, surrounded by like beautiful muralists, and a lot of my family members are artists and designers and jewelry makers. So that was really like instilled at me in me when I was really young. And I feel like looking back now, like that was just in fashion was just an outlet for me. And it was kind of like when growing up, a little bit difficult to kind of figure out like my style.
Mm.
And I think I'm in the past like 8 years of running the brand, it has really kind of really evolved and changed a lot. And it's overall like what I feel comfortable with. But one of the first like introductions to like fashion, like the actual like sewing part, was actually when I was in 8th grade, and my friend
Wow.
Jenny Richetti, she's a fashion designer. But when in 8th grade, she started a sewing club, and
Oh,
just
wow.
for myself, like I wanted to, be a friend and just like be supportive. And
Mhm.
I just went to that sewing club. It was me and like one other person and her, and like she was teaching us like the basics of sewing. And I barely remember like
Yeah.
any of those things really.
Mhm.
I just remember making like a pillow, and that was like, and like she brought in fabric, she brought in her sewing machine, and like
Wow.
she did all that. And that's like really like the first, I feel like the
Mhm.
first introduction to like fashion, where like you get the cut and sew aspect to it.
Mm. Mm.
And so yeah, that's like where things kind of lie with me with like fashion and just being in that realm. So
Mhm. Definitely. No, that's incredible. I need to take a sewing class. Like I'm terrible. I'm so terrible. I really want to learn though. I think it's something that I think all of us should learn. We don't have those classes anymore growing up. I never had a sewing class. I wish I had that. So shout out to your friend. That's really, really cool. And what, 8th grade you said?
yeah, 8th grade.
That's amazing. That's so
Yeah.
cool. And that kind of just leads us into this next question about the creation of Urban Native Era. Like, can you talk more about that and the process that it was to make UNE, and how your approach to fashion has changed over the years too?
So Urban Native Era really didn't start as like a clothing business or brand. It started to literally just spread awareness about Indigenous issues. And I was inspired
Mhm.
in December 2012 by this movement called Idle No More. It's a movement that started in Canada by four women, three of Indigenous descent and one of European. And it was overall to say no to the former Prime Minister Harper, on infringing on their rights, their water rights, their land rights.
Mhm.
And that movement reached me in the Bay Area, and it reached like all these different people across the world. And in support of our First Nation relatives, there were these round dances and rallies that happened in the Bay Area and in San Francisco and San Jose. And I was attending San Jose State at the time. And I just went with my like Nikon camera. I didn't really know too much about photography. Like I had a camera
Mhm.
and just shot it like stuff when I was in high school a little bit, but nothing too crazy. And I started to take photos and videos. And then I was like, I need to share this. I don't think any of my friends from college really knew what was happening, or like people didn't know what was happening. And I felt really like this urge to just share that. And yeah, so in December 2012, I launched Urban Native Era, and Urban Native is like pretty much a term where what is a term of if you live in the city, you're called like an urban native. But so that's what I've at the time identified as like an urban native. And then I felt like when this movement happened, it was this new era of visibility, of Indigenous invisibility in a different way through social media, through all these other different avenues. So that's how Urban Native Era started. And then we brought on the clothing aspect in May in 2013. And I really thought about, some of my upbringings of design and fashion, and a lot of my brothers who and sisters who do, native artwork, and how I can design and use that as a tool to really, um, you know, amplify the messages, but also like understanding now that like everyone learns in a different way, where we can share messages through different forms than media outlets, through murals, through fashion, through film. And a lot of us will like be able to grab concepts like in a different way. But I really wanted to share that through fashion, and just knowing now that like fashion is really a huge influence in the industry, like fashion, film, and music. And yeah, I wanted this to really influence a lot more and be really make a really big impact. So that's
Mhm.
how I started the brand. And the clothing aspect of it changed as well. Like I think beginning on, if you really look at some of our designs, they were really like, I mean, not the worst designs, but like they weren't that that good. And as my eye changed and developed through college and through taking photography class, design classes, and overall ending in advertising, like my idea of like how we can create as Indigenous people changed, where we
Mhm.
don't always have to put feathers on a hat, or put native, like what is like considered native design, like on a t-shirt. Like we can literally just create a flannel that doesn't have anything like what people deem as like
Mhm.
native stuff. And so my idea with that like really changed. And I'm really about like simplicity. Like you'll see in a lot of our designs now, like your native land or the hummingbird,
Mhm.
like these all have like some type of meaning, but they're different and unique in their own way. And um yeah, really kind of just simple. And yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
like it's changed a lot. It's been like 8 years, and I feel like as I develop as a designer, as a creative, the brand also really changes. And you'll see that if
Mhm.
you really look at like a timeline of like Urban Native Era, you'll see like this crazy shift and change of like ideas and designs.
No, I see it too because I have, I have a bunch of stuff like Ray's given me too over the years.
Yeah,
I've had remember like there was like the tank top with the like the pocket square and I have the Natives by the Bay. I have that one and what isn't that what it was called?
yeah, Names by the Bay.
By the
Yeah,
Bay. I have it's really cool to see the evolution of Urban Native Era, and I'm such a fan. Like I literally half of the hats that I have with me here in Montreal are from Urban Native Era. I have the hummingbird.
yeah.
I love the simplicity. I love the simplicity, and I love just the direct messages. And like some people in my cast have the "You Are on Native Land" hats too, and it's
Oh,
so cool to see that. And also can we like quickly talk about reservation dogs and how
yeah,
like Pauline Alexis is repping? Like that was so cool.
yeah,
Oh man,
yeah,
that's yeah, that was I remember that with the first episode, I was just like, what? That was awesome. So
yeah.
yeah. But it's really fun to hear about the creation story of Urban Native Era because it almost sounds like it's like started out as like activism or start out as like
Mhm.
coming from a place of education almost, and then
Yeah,
you're like, well, I also want to do this creative aspect too, and so it's amazing to see it how you've like mixed that activism and fashion. I think it's just it's so amazing, and I think personally for me now, whenever I'm supporting a brand, if I'm going to yeah, support any kind of clothing brand,
mhm.
like no matter if it's indigenous or not or whatever. I just want to know like what their mission statement is, because I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
so
yeah.
important. It's so important.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's like one of the things that I started to do in the past 2 years, and especially like my transition of like moving into my own space in LA and doing that. I'm really conscious of like what items I'm gonna buy and like who I'm gonna buy
mhm,
from. So I think that's like really like a huge aspect, and it's something that we're also like developing in and like manufacturing. Like, okay, well, do they are they like ethically? Is it all ethically sourced? You know,
mhm,
to like where do they put their dyeing process? Like dispose their dyeing for like some of the fabrics, like stuff like that.
mhm.
So I think those are like really good things
Yeah.
to just be aware of. And then with activism and with like that core of like how we started, it's forever going to be within Urban Native Era. And
Mhm.
like no matter, that's one of the things, like no matter where we end up or how big we get or whatever it is, like the core is like, I don't know, more, it's like visibility, it's all those things. So
Mhm. That's
mhm.
amazing. No, I have so much respect for you, and it's amazing to talk with Ray. Actually, we just had her, we just interviewed her right before you,
Okay.
and we talked a little bit about you and your work ethic, and
Mm.
I
Yeah,
listened to your interview with Ray, and it's amazing to see, and I think that's something
mm.
else that is really inspirational, because you are an activist, fashion designer, but also like an entrepreneur, like full on, and you show and embody what it means to start your own business, which for so many people, including myself, is so daunting. And like, how do you do that? Okay, look at this person. He breaks down like you got to work this many hours of the day. You got to put in this much time. You got to be disciplined. And
Mm.
so it's really inspirational. And so that's why I'm really excited for the listeners to hear this, because you're an inspiration, man.
Yeah,
Seriously. Um, and I kind of want to talk a little bit more about your specific collections, like the Sovereign collection. I'd love to hear more about this one. I'm a huge fan of this collection.
mm.
I loved all of the content y'all put out about it, and your amazing models that you had. I'd love to hear just
Mm.
more about that and how it was unique.
So I feel like I have to like kind of start it back, but for
Hmm.
like a past year and a half. But when I knew that that Urban Native Era like needed to move in like a different direction, and we wanted to focus on like the cut and sew aspect. So I don't know if you're aware or seen on social media, but yesterday it was Todd Oberly, our creative director's last day,
I
which
saw that.
yeah, which yeah, it's been a lot and a
Yeah.
big shift, but he really
Hmm.
did make a lot of changes and really
Hmm.
pushed for a lot of things. in the past year and a half, which feels like it's been like 5 to 10 years already.
Yeah,
But
amazing.
we brought on Hud Overly to focus more on the creative direction, and it's something that we talked about prior to him coming on as creative director in March 2020, was to focus on our cut and sew aspect and really what we wanted to, shift to as Urban Native Era, was to produce these like unique garments and like this really high quality stuff, looking at the details of fabrics to the concept of like sovereign. And yeah, it would like Sovereign Collection would not have been possible without like HUD
Mm,
being on board and really pushing for all of it. Like he did a lot of work with that. But overall, the Sovereign Collection is unique for like a lot of reasons. From, like I said, the cut and sew aspect. It's the first time we were actually able to create a pattern for our
oh,
garments.
wow.
So they're all unique patterns that we, like HUD and I, developed, and that we literally like looked at all the details from that to the fabrics. Like we working with bamboo to recycled buttons on the flannel. Like all these different aspects are really like something that we've never done before. And then to the execution of Sovereign, and for overall like connecting and reaching to different audiences and different people that we all have our own story. And I feel like through this collection, we really wanted to bring that out. Like everyone has their own way of being who they are, and it's okay. Like either way, like there's no direct way to come up or do whatever there is. And I know, in like even my background growing up in um, San Francisco and growing up like off the res, like there's that
Mhm.
whole thing where we tackle about it, but not only from an indigenous perspective, but from like anyone who's coming up. We're all like in our own unique journey.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's what this whole collection like was formed to be. And from the models, like we got a really diverse group of models, to the photographer, to like all of it. So
Oh
it's
man.
definitely something that like, yeah, it's I'm really glad to be able to release that collection, especially with HUD. And then
Mhm.
now to really focus more on the cut and sew aspects, because we were definitely developing more of that into the brand, more luxury pieces and unique
Mhm.
pieces that are going to be really different from anything else you've seen before.
Totally. Yeah. And all the listeners, check out Urban Native Era's new Sovereign collection. It's amazing. The details are it's beautiful. It's such an awesome collection, and I loved the all the media, social media that y'all did around that. It was really cool. It was really cool to see like models that all look different and all come from different walks of life, and it was just like, yes, this is exactly what we
Yeah.
need. So I had so much respect for that. It was really cool. And actually, that's a good segue to this next question about social media, because you are a social media beast. Oh man, it's funny. I don't know if you listen to Race podcast, you're on Race podcast, but the Create Well
Mhm.
podcast. And like one of the challenges was like, study someone's social media that like you really admire, and like you want to, you know, you're kind of jealous of, but like you want to like, emulate them. And for sure, first person I think of is you, man. Like Urban Native
Mhm.
Era, your social media, it's amazing to see like how it's a business, and I really admire that. And I'd love to hear about all of the social media stuff that y'all been doing. And you even have like a podcast, right? You have like so many things going on. I'd love to hear about your journey with all of that.
I mean, social media kind of like, I feel like kind of learning as I go, but advertising, like
Mhm.
learning advertising and marketing in college really like helped me put
Mhm.
just a different perspective on like a lot of those things. And not social media is not easy for a lot of folks. Like we
Mhm.
as creatives just want to create,
Mhm.
but we need to also understand that like we can't just do that without doing all this like business stuff. And and some people can in some ways, but for me, I saw it as like I just need to continue to create and put out content and think of new ideas. and really develop that mindset of creating content and like photos and coming up with like different strategies. And yeah, so that's like the whole thing. Right now we're in this big shift just because like HUD was took over a lot of
Hmm.
the social media stuff in the past year or so. And so we're in this big shift of finding, actually we're looking for a social media marketing manager currently. So big shift, but I think it's very very necessary, and to really think outside the box as well. And I think
Hmm.
what we're doing for Urban Native Era is making it feel really like personable, where we had like HUD and I, we would be on TikToks, or HUD
Hmm.
would be on the podcast. So it felt like we wanted to really put, in the past year or 2 years, like really put more of the face to the brand. And I think that's something, just from a marketing and advertising perspective, that like people want to know. Like we're shifting in this new dynamic of brands, that like we want to know who's behind the brand.
Mm.
And like the more we can really show like who we are and our characteristics, whether like what I enjoy to do versus like what HUD likes to do, like stuff like that, if we can really show
Hmm.
that in a different way. Even I'm talking a lot about in our personal Instagram as well, because I feel like there is some separation between
Hmm.
your business brand type of thing and then your personal branding.
Totally.
um but yeah, so that's like something that I'm excited to continue and kind of really share like really dope content that we can, and really showcase this diverse amount of people overall through our feed. And what we're doing next, we got really really big things in the
Oh,
works. So
oh man, I'm excited, man. I'm ready. I'm here
yeah,
for it. I'm here for it.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, it's just it's amazing to see, Urban Native Era and where y'all are today. It's so exciting. But I know as well, I guess I don't. But I guess my question now is what are some of the challenges that you faced that you're facing today and have faced as a Lipan Apache man in the fashion industry as a native brand, like, and how have these challenges helped you to how have these challenges helped you move forward?
things. And I think, thinking just as like a clothing brand, like I remember I used to tell people, I wouldn't want to tell people that I was a clothing brand, because the moment you say it, like people are like, oh yeah, just another person starting a clothing brand. And I really like didn't like that, so I kind of rephrased it in like a different way.
Hmm.
um so like there's those challenges of like, some people are like not going to really vibe with what you're doing and what you're creating. But like there's that type of stuff. And then there's also, I feel like, as an indigenous person, native person in the fashion industry, I feel like there's this big expectation where you have to, as like an indigenous person, you have to, and have a clothing brand, you have to adhere to what society sees as indigenous. So like creating like patterns, and like that's what they want to see. Or even just like people really want to see this whole idea of like indigenous folks, where I feel like comes from this like past view
Mm-hmm.
in a way. So like I think that's like really a big challenge. And right now, like some of our FAQs is like, oh, can I wear this if I'm not native?
Mm,
Or can we change the your native land to we? But people don't
mm,
really understand that like no, we can't do that. Like you is coming from more of indigenous perspective on that lens. And
mm-hmm.
there's these like little things where people are gonna want to kind of just, they want to like force this like expectation or idea of like what you should be. And I think really sticking to your truth, um, to move forward and like just do what you feel and see is going to do good, and continue to move forward with that is really like where it's at. So like when we get those things, I'm like, nope, like we're not changing
Yeah.
those things about our brand. And we're continuing to move forward. um, but yeah, I'm excited though. I'm really excited to see like the waves of indigenous fashion overall. Like we were just in New York for New York Fashion Week We didn't have any shows, but we had a few people, a few friends of ours were showing, and one was A. Laylam, who's a fashion designer from Canada, and she showed, and like, I just love to see people represented. There's so many like dope indigenous models
Mm-hmm.
there, and like that was super exciting to see. So we wanted to be there to really like amplify those things and just kind of like show that like we need more indigenous designers in like New York Fashion Week in whatever
Mm-hmm.
capacity, whether it's like whatever it is. Like I think we need to be in these spaces. So I think that is
100%. Yeah.
yeah, and that inspires me to continue to move. Like after that, after New York, I was like, let's go. Like let's let's keep on moving. Let's get where we need to be and like where we need to be represented. And
Yeah, I saw those photos of you and DeFaro, and I was like,
yeah,
"Oh man, y'all are having a good time. That looks so much fun."
yeah,
Uh, and I do really admire. Man, I feel like I'm just like throwing you so much admiration, but it's real, man. I'm telling you. But um, I really admire how you talk very openly about that, about the you are a native land versus, some people are
mhm,
like, why not we? Why not I? It's like, no, 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 that's not the point. Like
yeah,
the point is it's you, we're talking
yeah,
to you. And I also really love how you encourage non-native people to wear your clothes. Like
yeah,
that's not
yeah,
the point. The point is all of us should be wearing this. You should be wearing this so that you can be a good ally and you can,
yeah,
and supporting in indigenous communities. And I think I heard that in your interview with Ray about um, how it's important for also non-native communities to
hmm,
participate in that. I completely agree, and I love that.
yeah, yeah. That's something that like I was just talking to a friend about this past weekend. It's like there's this responsibility that indigenous people need to teach everyone about
Hmm.
indigenous things, and like we don't have to do that. Like there's so much, and I feel like it and a lot of people know it. There's so much energy that like drains us of like
Hmm.
having to like, go through this like going through this like, I don't want to go too deep, but intergenerational trauma to
Of
like all
course.
these things that we have to like bring up, and it could be a lot on people. And I know a lot of people who do that type of work, but I feel like we're moving towards this like self-educating ourselves and
Hmm.
then being able just to do the research and follow. And I think that's what's great about like urban native era, where it's kind of like a gateway. It's like an entry to a lot of people. Like they see it for the first time and they're like, oh cool, like I want to support, I want to wear this. And then they'll start to learn more about indigenous issues. They'll start
Hmm.
to like follow all these like native people that we're tagging. All
Hmm.
these things are really so.
No, I completely agree because I think that's been yeah, as a indigenous artist, it's frustrating when some people are always asking like, explain this to me, and I'll be like, all right, here, I'm just gonna go to this website, go to Illuminative, go to Seeding Sovereignty, like go buy some go buy some clothes from Urban Native Era, go to NTVS Natives, like that's yeah.
Illuminative is
Oh.
doing. It's like I love what Illuminatives is doing. Like they're really like pushing forward in all aspects. And I just like really acknowledged their designer, their graphic designer, because I think that's like really huge. They've been killing
Mm-hmm.
it this year with like all their graphics. A friend of mine, Jay Begay, we call it like shareable graphics. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they've been killing it in all that. And I'm just like, I love to see really like good designers showcase their work in that way, because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
design is really powerful, and how we use it in our community can really like make waves, make a lot of change.
Completely agree. Yeah. Their Instagram is always like the top of my list whenever I open because they're doing so much content, so much amazing stuff. And that's why like I'm just constantly sharing their stuff because like they'll say it way better than I can. Like, yo, go to this page. If you have questions, go to their page. You're not going to learn from me. You're going to learn from this page. So yeah, it's really cool to see. And then also Urban Native Era to have that like, you're right, like a gateway. Like here, wear this hat. Someone asks, "What's with your hat?" go to this, da 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 da. Before you know it, more and more people know, and which is really exciting. And I think there is such a turning of the tide since 2020, when a lot of stuff was happening around racial issues, where I can speak for a lot of, I'm not going to speak for different communities, but there's a lot of people who are like, I'm not going to educate you. Like, that's not my job. So, yeah, I think it's really important to also acknowledge that it's not your job. But yeah, and we have a few more questions, and this is a question I think for a lot of our listeners who are starting out in their careers and trying to figure out where they're going to go. So how do you feel your work has influenced and and impacted others, and what do you want listeners to be able to take away from your work?
Many things that like I probably don't even know how it's impacted so many people.
Yeah,
But I've had a few people in the community reach out to me about the era and them getting reconnected or with their indigenous roots and like really feeling proud to be native. So the things that I see like urban native era has done, but so many other stories that like I haven't heard, and I kind of like want to know these stories because I feel like we've been around for about to be 9 years in December, so it's a long time. So I feel like there's definitely been a lot of influence and definitely impacted a lot of people's lives in some way, whether that's big or small. But
yeah, no, well, definitely, 100%. Yeah, I've seen it too in a lot of like my friends in my community who don't know too much about indigenous issues, and they're like, I love your hat, can I buy a hat? I'm like, yes, you can buy a hat, but also read this, and check out their website and look at all the work they're doing. And it's been really cool to have see that and see how it affects also indigenous communities. And then also going back to reservation dogs, like, that's, dude, can we quickly just touch on that, and how did that feel? How did that happen? And can we talk about that?
reservation dogs, so like they reached out about last March, I believe it was. I'm not sure if it was even time is so like
Yep,
messed
yep.
up in my head, but they reached out and they just asked for a few pieces of our Your Native Land hats, and if you watch closely, there's other items too of like our brand,
That's so
different
cool.
different characters. So they reached out and we sent them a bunch of things, and we knew like, yeah, I mean, we're down to support Sterling's work and
Mhm.
Taika as well. So we're super stoked about it. But yeah, we just sent that to them, and then we didn't know in what capacity it would have been used. But I'm like really stoked to see that it was on like Paulina Alexa's stuff, and
Mhm.
it was really dope. Yeah, overall to see. And I loved that our community of like people who support the brand like noticed it. Like they
Yeah.
were like, "Oh, I saw this on Reservation Dogs," or like it was so cool seeing, and like them, like people feeling really proud and excited
Mhm.
you know um, for this was like it's really dope. And it isn't the first time we've been on a TV show, but it's first time we've been on like a TV show for that long,
Mm.
or like that much. That our
Yeah.
hat was like worn by a main character throughout like the whole season, pretty much, or the
Yeah.
whole episode.
No,
It's
for
really
sure. It
cool.
was so cool. And my Instagram was blowing up with different people being like, I have the same hat. Oh my God, I have the same hat. Like, I have that hat. Oh, like, I'm so proud. It
Yeah,
was really cool, man. It was so exciting. And that show is just absolutely killing it. And Paulina Alexis in particular is just like, oh my gosh, she's incredible. So it was just, that was exciting. Even for me, I was just living vicariously through you. I was like, this is so freaking cool, man. So
yeah, it's
cool.
cool.
So yeah, I just have one last question for you. What advice would you give today to your creative aspirant younger self?
Yeah, I think there's so many things, and for a lot of us, these past year and a half, past 2 years have been a lot, and it's honestly the first time that I was able, not willingly, to stop and not travel physically, and then also mentally be in one place. And that was like, yeah, I just can't even explain how hard that was for,
Hmm.
a lot of people and myself. But that, and then the past 2 years, really realizing that I needed to stop and I needed to really reflect on who I am as an indigenous person, as like just a human being, and reflecting on like my past. Like I really dive deep into a lot of my past traumas of like, oh, why don't I communicate too well, or why don't I um want to do this, or why do I even get frustrated? Like I was going into like why, like all my frustrations, and it was kind of like a weird like self therapy thing for me.
Hmm.
And I feel like what I would tell my like younger self is to literally like reflect and think about our interactions, think about our what frustrates us, what frustrates me. Because as a kid, I know I was like really frustrated sometimes, and I never really dealt with that. So in looking back, I would tell my younger self that like stop and reflect and think about these things, and think about how we can really just like, whether it's a weekly or a monthly, just reflect on our interactions. And really, for me, that's how I try to go about it. I've been reflecting on like, well, on both sides to a conversation, or reflecting, well, maybe this person honking is having a really bad day, and letting that not to really frustrate me in that moment, because I know sometimes things can get thrown at you in a way. So yeah, it's been so insane in that way for me, but I feel like it's really much needed for me to really
Hmm.
stop and reflect. And I'm excited for the things that I've learned about myself and about the way I want to go about my life, so that I can continue to do this work. Because if I, a lot of people say this, but it's like we need to heal ourselves before we continue to do try to like do other things in the community. And I really kind of dived really deep into those past traumas and those frustrations and all that, just to really kind of become a lot better overall as a human being. And yeah, like I said, I do that in a lot of my interactions. I reflect on like, oh well, how can I do that better, especially managing a team now, um, where I never managed the whole team situation. So
Wow.
yeah, for that's like kind of what I would really kind of tell myself to kind of stop and reflect on those things.
That's on this amazing advice. Like I'm totally going to take that away from this as well because I don't know, in Western society, Western
Hmm.
culture, we're such a fast moving, let's just
Yeah,
move on, just be strong, move on, be a man, just
yeah,
move on. And versus like, no, let's take a second. Let's talk about why that bothered me. I think that's so important.
yeah, yeah.
Especially as men in our
Hmm.
society. It's like we gotta be strong. We gotta just suck it up, versus like, no, that hurt my feelings. Why did that hurt my feelings? Let's talk about that, So I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's really cool. I really love that. So all the listeners,
Yeah.
you got a gem. That's really good. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and just going back on that, like I've noticed the way I worked as well. Like I think that's one of the reasons why I was able to start Urban Native Era. Like the way I started to learn the way I work,
Mm,
and I work really quick and fast. So I was like, if I have an idea, I'll like move quicker, like than the speed of light, just to
mm,
get it all done and figured out. But that in itself can be really problematic, like moving in this fast pace. So
mm.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't imagine. And then having that with a whole team and being a CEO, like, man,
yeah,
that's incredible. And I just again have so much respect for you. And well, one day we'll hang out again. I think I'm just remembering the last time I saw you was at Ray's performance at the Troubadour
oh yeah,
when
yeah,
you
I
and
remember
HUD
that.
came. And that was an awesome night. But
Hmm.
but yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2019 for
Yeah,
sure,
probably 2019. Yeah, it's
a
crazy.
long time as
Yeah.
well.
Well, Thank you so much for joining us today, man. It means a lot. We're all such huge fans. You know, all of us at the department at CSUN is, you know, we're repping Urban Native Era hardcore. So we're really grateful to have you. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah, I really appreciate that. Appreciate all the stuff here.
Of
Cool.
course, man. All right. Well, thank you, listeners, and we'll see you soon.